Hi everyone. I hope all of you are doing pretty well. And hi, this is Megha. I'm a biology teacher here at askIITians, and I'm so very happy that you chose to study with us. Okay. Now for today's lesson, guess what we are studying? I mean, you guys already know since you clicked on the recording, we basically are studying the cell fundamental unit of life. Okay. So let me just tell you what topics will be discovered in this particular class. And before that, I'll also give you an overview of the entire chapter. All right. So what topics will be covered is the discovery of the cell, who discovered it, how it was found, and then cell theory. It's quite obvious that whenever one thing comes into the discovery, into the existence, or when people know about it, they obviously formulate multiple theories or multiple opinions about it. Okay. So we have one particular cell theory which we'll be studying about, and this will also be taught to you in the ninth standard. Then we have the variations in cell number, shape, and size. This topic is related to wherever the cells are present and why are they present there and how are they present there, or how their location and function affects their particular shape and the size, right? And then we'll be learning about the parts of cell. Now, don't you worry, I won't be storming you with all the parts in just one particular lecture. We'll be breaking it down into parts by parts per lecture. I'll just be giving you the simple introduction, all right? And then we have the cell membrane. Now, this is the most important part of the entire cell, okay? And most of the questions are asked from the cell membrane, from the Olympiads as well, and from your for your subjective exams too, okay, like the school exams that are there. Okay, now starting with the cell, this is one 3D structure of the cell that you're seeing right here, and we'll be covering most of this as well. Now apart from these topics which will be covered today, the entire chapter is based upon what is the cell, what are cell organelles, what are the functions of different cell organelles, okay, and how exactly all of the cell organelles are working together in order to make the cell properly function in a synchronized or in a rhythmic, or let's say in a harmonious manner, right? So we'll be moving forward, and there we go. So the first person to these to actually see the cell was Robert Hooke. Okay, guys, name of the scientists are sometimes the direct questions from the exams. Okay, the Olympiads or the higher exams that will be studying. Okay, so it was the Robert Hooke in 1665 who actually managed to see a cell for the first time in the history. Okay, and what exactly he observed? He observed the bark of oak tree, right? And when he observed this particular tree, what he observed was the structures, the honeycomb like structures which were present. Okay, so these are the exact structures which he found under the microscope. Now the microscope that he had was not as advanced, it was a simple magnifying lens which he had worked to put together. Okay, not the magnifying lens which you can find in the stores, at the play stores, the bookstore. Okay, it was actually something that he worked upon, right? And he saw these kind of structures of the bark of the or the cork of the oak tree. Okay, now what he deduced or what he actually understood from these was that the cell had a honeycomb like structure. What is a honeycomb? Honeycomb like structure. Honeycomb is basically the kind of structure which is present in a beehive. Okay, these are the small rooms which are present in a beehive. Now, what he actually saw were the cell walls of the tree. He couldn't see the proper cell organelles or the cell membrane or anything. No, because his microscope was very primitive in nature or very underdeveloped in nature, since there wasn't as advancement in the technology as today's, because the year was 1665. See, so what he actually saw was just the cell walls which are present in the cell. Now there were multiple more scientists who came along the line. So there was this another scientist who was called as the Anton van Leeuwenhoek. I'll write down the name for you. Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Okay, so this was the scientist who first observed the living cell under the microscope. Okay, and the living cell that he observed was a bacteria. And from where did he find the bacteria? From the pond water. Okay, so what you see right here in this particular picture, this is also a simple kind of microorganism which could be found in the pond water. Okay, now this could be anything regarding, this could be anything ranging from a bacteria to algae. So don't you worry about it, we'll be studying more. All right. Also, there was just another scientist you may come across, Robert Brown. Do not get confused between Robert Hooke and Robert Brown. Robert Hooke discovered the cell and Robert Brown discovered the nucleus, which is the brain of the cell. Okay, we'll be studying more about it. Now that is all about the discovery of the cell that you need to learn in this particular standard, and you'll be learning a little more of it stepwise in the 9th and 11th upcoming standards. 11th if you choose biology, right? Okay, moving forward to the cell theory. Now listen to this very, very carefully. Cell theory is like an opinion which was formed after the observations of multiple type of situations and cells. Okay, and based on this, three postulates were given. Now those postulates are extremely, extremely important. Okay, because those postulates, they are the ones which actually prove what a cell is doing into the nature, or how exactly there is the arrangement of cell in different kind of organisms. Okay, so this cell theory was given by Theodor Schwann, Matthias Jacob Schilden, and Rudolf Virchow. Three scientists were there. Okay, so we'll take their names one by one. So moving with this, I'll be writing the names right here on this particular slide. Cell theory was first given by Sheldon and Schwann. Okay. And here we go with the writing of the scientist names. Okay, remember this. It's very important that you remember the scientist names in biology. Theodor Schwann. Okay. And then we had Matthias Jacob. We have the Matt. You can break down their names. Matt, H-A-I-S, Matthias Jacob Shildon. That's his like complete name. Matthias Jacob Shildon. Okay, so these were the two scientists who actually gave the cell theory first, okay, in 1838. In 1838, it was the Matthias Jacob Shildon who came first, and then it was Theodor Schwann who came along the lines, and then compositely in 1839, they gave the cell theory, okay. So we'll write the year 1839, okay. So what they actually gave in the cell theory was that cells are made up of, or like all the cells, they are morphologically and physiologically the units of the living organisms. Okay, simple, in simple words, if we talk about it, cells are the fundamental units of life. Fundamental units of life. Okay, that was the first postulate that they gave. Okay, first point that they gave. Next was that cells, they basically are present in all the living bodies. So let's say all the living organisms are made up of cells. All the living, please note that down here with me, living organisms are made up of cells, right? Now, if you think about it, have you ever seen a car being made up of cells? No. Do you see this particular stylus or the pen? Is this made up of cells? No. Is my headset made up of cells? No. Am I made up of cells? Yes. Why? Because I'm a living organism, right? So that is one thing. Okay. And next thing was that all the cells, they basically have this similar structure. All living cells, or let's say all these cells, had a basic structure and organelles. That means all these cells will have an endoplasmic reticulum, all these cells will have a nucleus, all these cells will have a Golgi apparatus. Okay, so that is one basic requirement of being a cell. They'll have at least a similar structure along the lines. That is why we can study the plant cell and animal cells, and we'll know about a lot of cells altogether around the world. Now, that is one thing. Apart from that, Bacha, as I told you, there was another scientist, Rudolf Virchow. Why Rudolf Virchow came? Rudolf Virchow. Okay, now as you read this particular theory, what you don't get from this theory or what you do not obtain from this theory is the answer to your curiosity that where did the cells come from exactly, right? We know what they're made up of, we know they make all the living organisms, and we do realize that cells are the fundamental unit of life. All the living organisms are made up of cells except the viruses, okay? Because viruses are present on the border of living and non-living. So we'll discuss about those later, right? But we did not come to know from these points that from where the cells came, right? So Rudolf Virchow was another scientist who came up in 1855 and explained that cells came from pre-existing cells. Cells came from pre-existing cells. That means cells will give rise to new cells. Cells will be born from the cells themselves, right? We can go for this particular as well. Okay, we'll go from this particular text and we'll see. So you see, three principles of cell theory. First is DNA is passed between the cell during the cell division. Okay. Second is the cell of the organisms within the similar species are mostly the same. And then energy flow occurs within the cells. That is like the common thing, or that is like the most generalized thing that is present in every cell theory, or this cell theory basically, which was given by the Theodor Schwann and Matthew Jacob Sheldon. But these are the postulates which you'll have to write for the exam, so kindly note these down. Okay, and then Rudolf Virchow is the one person who modernized the cell theory, or who actually answered the question that cells came from pre-existing cells into the existence. For example, if this was an amoeba and this amoeba was to give rise to the binary fission, it'll go ahead and divide into the two daughter cells, right? So binary fission is the type of reproduction which leads to the production of two daughter cells, okay? The identical two daughter cells. So you see we have the parent amoeba and we have the daughter amoeba number one and daughter amoeba number two. So these cells came from where? From the parent amoeba, right? So cells came from the pre-existing cells. Now that being said, we'll move forward to the next slide. Now, next slide, we'll be discussing about the variation in cell number. Here, we'll be discussing about the unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms, the prokaryotic organisms, the eukaryotic organisms, and then we'll discuss about the shape and size, right? So one thing that you must notice is that on the basis of the cell number, we have divided the organisms into two categories, the multicellular and the unicellular. As the name suggests, one, cellular cells. So one cellular organism or one celled organism is what we call as the unicellular. Amoeba, bacteria, different kind of algae, okay? And then we have the multicellular organisms, which are made up of multiple number of cells. For example, the human beings, okay? For example, yourself, right? We have different kind of animals, cats and dogs. We have the plants and trees, right? We have the fishes. So there are multiple type of organisms based on to the number of cells. And we have two broad categories. We have the unicellular and we have the multicellular organisms. And I have given you multiple examples as well. But there's one teensy bit thing that you need to note down here is we'll be discussing about the prokaryotic. Okay, I'll just be giving you a little definition of both these, and we'll be discussing about the eukaryotic. Now understand this thing. Pro means old. Karyotic means nucleus, having old type of nucleus. U means true karyotic nucleus. So the organisms which have old type of nucleus which was present thousands of years ago and is still the same in the multiple organisms, those organisms are called as the prokaryotic organisms. For example, we have bacteria, right? And then we have the eukaryotic organisms. That means they have the true nucleus, or they have the evolved or the modernized nucleus. For example, the human beings, right? Animals, plants. Important thing is, bacha, the prokaryotic organisms are the old type of organisms. They are smaller in size and they are very, very primitive in function. Primitive means old, okay? They won't have the usual organelles which are present in these cells. They'll just have a haphazard manner type of arrangement in the entire cell, okay? They won't have a nucleus. They won't have a mitochondria. They won't have a Golgi apparatus. No, they'll just have, let's say, very basic structure which was present in the primitive times, in the old and ancient times. And from there, the cells kind of evolved, and few cells did not, which we call as the prokaryotic. Whereas the eukaryotic cells are the ones which are bigger and they kind of have most of the organelles which are important, okay? And prokaryotic cells are very, very simple, whereas the eukaryotic cells are responsible for doing the complex functions, right? Don't worry, we'll be coming across a lot more of these later. But now I'll move forward to the shape and size. All right. So shape and size, see, it's quite obvious that cells, not all these cells have the identical shape and size. They'll obviously be different in shape and size, right? Why so? That is based upon the location where they are exactly present and the function they have to carry out, okay? And this kind of affects everything about their structure and shape, okay? So go by the keywords. We'll give you multiple examples. So we have these stem cells. Stem cells are the kind of cells which can give rise to any type of cell, or which can differentiate into any type of cell, right? Stem cells are basically present in the embryo. What is embryo? Embryo is the, let's say, stage of life which basically has just started differentiating into the different body parts, okay? So and it'll have a lot of stem cells which will be giving rise to different type of cells. Then we have the RBCs, or the red blood cells. You see their shape? You see their shape? They have a discoid shape. They have a discoid kind of structure, right? And why do they have such a structure? Because they have to move around in a lot of blood vessels, narrow blood vessels, and they have to carry the oxygen. So in order to move through the narrow spaces and accommodate a lot of oxygen, they have such a shape, okay? Then we have the muscle cells. Why are muscle cells like this? Why are they parallelly arranged to each other? Because muscle cells are responsible for the movement of a body, right? For example, look at my video. I can move my hand like this, right? I can move my hand like this. I can move my lips or hands like this, my palms and fingers like this. Why? Because the muscle cells are arranged next to each other parallelly, and they are rhythmically contracting and relaxing and then producing the movements that I'm making, right? So that is why they're long and present parallelly to each other. And then we have the intestinal cells. Now, why are intestinal cells like this? Why are they square and why are they flat? Because they have to absorb a lot of things and they have to make tube, which is the small intestine. Okay, so in order to arrange themselves into a tube-like manner, in a lumen-like manner, they are arranged in such a way and they have such a shape. Next, we have the fat cell. Fat cell is also called as the adipose tissue. This is something you'll be learning more about in the ninth standard, okay? But I've told you anyway. So adipose tissue, the place where I've written the adipose tissue is like the oil droplet that these cells store. That is why they're like spherical in nature. Then we have these muscle cells, okay? They're long and narrow and parallel. I just explained. But blood cells, I just explained. Bone cells, Why are bone cells like this? Because they have to attach themselves to the neighboring bone cells in order to make a compact structure so our body can stand straight properly, right? And then we have the sperm. Why does sperm have a tail? So that it can move towards the egg. Okay, why is ovum like this? Why is egg like this? So that it can like stay at one place, and the sperm can find it and fertilize it. And then we have the nerve cell. Now, nerve cell is like my literal favorite. Why, you ask? Because nerve cell is the one which is responsible for sending and transmitting the signals in our body. And the nerve cells, they have these dendrites. These are the dendrites, these branches that are present right here. And then these have the nerve endings. Nerve endings. Okay, so these dendrites are responsible for receiving the signal from the next nerve cell, because these are arranged next to each other like this. Okay, like line to line. So these dendrites receive the signal, and signal is passed through this. Signal is passed through the entire length like this. Okay, and then nerve endings, they're also, present wherever the next neuron starts like this, and then they pass on to the signal to the next neuron. Okay, neuron or the nerve cell, one and the same thing. So that is a lot of information that I've given you. So make sure that you learn and revise everything. Okay. Next, we are going to study the parts of the cell. As I told you, I won't be overboarding with the information right here, because we'll be studying the divisions of these particular organelles into the number of lectures. So what we'll be doing here is I'll just be giving you a little information of about how exactly there are multiple cell organelles in the cell and how exactly they are present and they function. I'll just give you an overview. Okay. So starting with the cell, the normal cell here, and then the organelles of the cell here, you can see both of these. Okay, so one thing that is important right here is that between the animal and plant cell, the difference of the cell organelles is the cell wall. Okay, plant cells have the cell wall, and animals, they do not have any type of cell wall, which you must have studied from the junior classes. And then chloroplast is like the kitchen of the cell. This was taught to you in the fourth standard as well. So right, starting from the cell structure and the organelles of the cell, first of all, we have the cilia. If these cilia, these hair-like structures which you're seeing over the cell, these hair-like structures, these are the cilia. These could be present in multiple cells in the human body as well, in order to help the uh, in order to help the components move from one place to another, right? So look at my video again. These cilia, they move like this. Okay, so whenever they're moving like this, they're kind of letting the components pass on to them like this. Okay, towards the like next place, or forward into the lumen or into the tube. So these cilia could be present anywhere. Okay, next we have the cell wall. Cell wall is present in the plant cell. So we'll be learning more about the cell wall in the next session. So cell wall basically is responsible for the protection, for the sturdiness of the cell, and it also helps in maintaining the structure and shape of the plant cell. Okay, and why do plants, they require the cell wall? Because they cannot move from one place to another. Okay, so in order to have the requirements fulfilled of getting the shape properly maintained, they have the cell wall. Next is the cell membrane. We'll be learning more about the cell membrane or the plasma membrane, one and the same thing, in this session itself. So cell membrane or the plasma membrane is extremely crucial. Why? Because it is responsible for letting the components in and out of the cell depending upon the requirements. Okay, so let's say if my cell, they require a lot of fat molecule, okay, oils and fats in order to produce energy, or let's say a lot of carbohydrate in order to produce the energy. Okay, in the sixth standard, you must have learned about the components of food. Okay, so you should remember what are fats and carbohydrates. So my plasma membrane will see how much fat or carbohydrates are required in my cell, and only according to that requirement it will allow the molecules to pass through it inside the cell, right? So that is one thing. Next thing that you see right here is that we have the nucleus. nucleus is extremely important. Okay, this nucleus is extremely important. It has like three parts. We'll be studying all of it into the detail. So nucleus basically is kind of like the brain of the cell, and it requires let's say it requires to the like major requirement for the nucleus is to control every single function which is going on in the cell. Okay, all the instructions are passed through the nucleus, and it has a DNA of the cell. That DNA is passed on to the next generation as a heredity material. What is a heredity material? Something which is passed on from generations to generation. In the case of cell, it is the DNA, and it contains all the information about you. For example, the DNA which is present in my cell has the information about how my nose would be like, how my eyes would be like, how my cheeks would be like. Okay, so that is one thing, and it has multiple parts. We'll be studying about more of these later. Then we have the endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum, or if not, you can see right here, endoplasmic rough reticulum, okay, and smooth endoplasmic reticulum. We'll be talking about both types. Okay, so the major function of endoplasmic reticulum is to receive the signals or the instructions from the nucleus, and then making the proteins based on it, and then sending off all the proteins in the entire cell for the smooth functioning of the cell. Okay, you must remember that our entire body is made up of proteins. Okay, that is one thing. And then we have the Golgi apparatus, which is like right next to the nucleus. Golgi apparatus is like the postman of the cell. Okay, so major function is like it receives the things and then sends off the things to the required address in the cell itself. We'll be learning more about it. I know this is a lot to take in. There's a lot of information, but I promise you, this is a very scoring chapter. If you keep on revising, it'll help you a lot. All right. Okay. Now moving to the next one, my friends, we have the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of cell. You won't forget this your entire life. I promise you that. Right? So mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Why? Because it produces the energy. And why do we need energy? To remain alive, to work. For example, the way I'm talking right now, I'm blinking my eyes, which you cannot see from the spectacles, I think, right? All of this is requiring energy, which is being produced by the mitochondria, right? Similarly, we'll have multiple type of parts of cells. So don't you worry about it. All the important things will be discussed. We'll be starting with the first thing, which is the cell membrane. Okay, now see, cell membrane is also called as the plasma membrane, which I did tell you about while we were discussing the previous slide. It is found in all the cells, okay, and it separates the outside environment and the components of cell. It is like a covering, it's like a thin covering, and it is separating the outer environment and the inner component of the cell. Okay, and now I'll be discussing about what it is made up of. Okay, so the important thing that you see right here is that we have the lipid bilayer. Lipid bilayer. Lipid is nothing but fat, and bi means two, and layer means layers. Okay, like the layers. So what you see right here is this phospholipid bilayer, or the lipid bilayer, of which the plasma membrane or the cell membrane is composed of, it basically has a component like this. Okay, so what you see right here, this is the head of the lipid molecule. Okay, see, so this is the head and this is the tail. Right, now important things about head and tail is that this head is hydrophilic. This tail is hydrophobic. Okay, hydro means water, water. Philic means loving. Phobic means fearing. Okay, so the head is hydrophilic. That means it is water loving. It is ready to, let's say, be in contact with the water, or it is ready to communicate with the water or coexist with the water. Whereas the hydrophilic, or the tail part of the phospholipid molecule, it is water fearing, or the hydrophobic. That means it is staying away from the water. It will try to stay away from the water, right? Now listen to me. It is made up of phosphobilipid layer. That means one molecule is right here, one molecule is right here, and another molecule is right here. And these will be arranged like this. Okay. So this is the arrangement which you're seeing right here. This is how everything is arranged. Okay, why is the head outside? Because it is water loving. Why is the tail on the inside? Because it is water fearing. Okay, now it is very important for you to remember that the entire thing that we're talking about in the phospholipid or the plasma membrane, this basically is very, very important for the sake of controlling whatever components are going in and out of the cell. All right. So this is very, very important. And this plasma membrane or the cell membrane, we'll be studying more about it. Okay. Now, important thing that you need to know, that there are multiple type of, let's say, models which were given for the sake of understanding the functioning of the plasma membrane, right? So the one which we are studying right now is called as the fluid mosaic model, which was given by Singer and Nicholson in 1972. I will mention that here for you. Okay. Singer and Nicholson in 1972. Okay, so this was given by Singer and Nicholson in 1972, and this is called as the fluid mosaic model. Okay, and this is the most accepted model throughout the places. Why? Because it explains most of the things, and it explains how exactly the cell membrane is structured, or what are the components of the cell membrane, and how exactly it works. Okay. So that being said, we'll be diving a little more into it, okay? And I'll be telling you how exactly there are different components in the cell membrane, apart from the two phospholipid bilayers that we just studied about, okay? So taking into account the inside of the cell and outside of the cell, I am giving you this particular diagram in this one slide. Okay. I hope all of you can see this diagram clearly. So what do we see here is, let's say this is the outer side of the cell as in the outer environment, okay? And this is the inner side of the cell as in the inner environment, okay? So this one will have a lipid bilayer, which we already studied about. You can easily see the type of components which are present right here. Okay, sometimes a lipid molecule can be like this, sometimes it can be like this. Totally depends upon the different kind of phospholipid molecules or the lipid molecules which are present in the cells. Okay, you'll be learning more about this in the chapter biomolecules in 11th standard if you choose biology, right? And I'm looking forward to it. It's like really, really interesting. Now see, you see proteins here as well. Proteins in a plasma membrane? What? I mean, yes, you have two type of proteins. We have the internal proteins and external proteins. Internal proteins are like this one, the one which is present right here, okay? And external proteins are like this one, which is present outside. So internal proteins are present, oopsies, right? So these are present throughout the length, or throughout the plasma membrane, okay, throughout the plasma membrane, the entire length of the plasma membrane, whereas the external are either present in the outer layer or inner lipid layer. Okay, lipid layer. So it is present on one of the layers. Okay, why so, and why are proteins present here in the first place? Because they act as the transport proteins help in transporting the molecules from in to the outside and from outside to the inside of the cell. Okay, they help in carrying the different molecules. For example, this one which you see right here, it has this particular space. Okay, this particular space which you see, and through this space the molecule will be moving from outside to the inside of the cell, right? And apart from that, you also see the carbohydrate chains. What are carbohydrate chains doing here? Carbohydrate chains help in maintaining the structural integrity. What is the structural integrity? Carbohydrates, they basically help in maintaining the shape of the plasma membrane. Okay, maintains the shape of the plasma membrane, right? So that is one thing. Now you know about the cell membrane, you know what kind of components are there. Okay, now one just teensy bit information which is left is that this is living. Okay, this is very very thin, this could be a little transparent. Okay, and this is made up of proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates, as you have already studied, right? As I've already told you through the diagram as well, which is really, really important. And it helps in the movement of molecules in and out. Why? Because it is selectively permeable. Selectively permeable. This is the star phrase that you should remember. Okay, it selects whatever could go in and out through itself. Okay, then it gives the permission. Now that is all about the cell. I guess you guys enjoyed and learned. I'll give you a question myself. What is a cell? Easiest? Yes. Very frequent? Yes. Do you know the answer? I hope so. So the answer to this one is cell is the fundamental unit of life. That means without cell, there is no life, right? And one more thing, I'll give you another question. Is plasma membrane or cell membrane completely permeable or selectively permeable? I just talked about this. We just discussed about this. I hope you know the answer. And the correct answer is that it is selectively permeable. It selects whatever goes in and out of itself, right? And that is why it helps in the proper controlling of the traffic throughout the cell. Okay. And that's it for today. Thank you so much. You guys have fun and I enjoyed teaching you guys. Okay. I really hope you learn a lot from this one. Stay safe, enjoy. Bye bye. Take care.